Yeah. Uh-huh. It's Friday evening. We're here on another episode of Fearless Impact, our first ever Fearless Impact episode. We have a very special guest in the house tonight, and it is my dear friend, my entrepreneurial bestie, my adventurous guru, and just a calm, sweet energy, and it is Reef Colman.
I'm receiving all of that. Thank you, Ella. You're so amazing. I feel so honored to be on the first Fearless Impact podcast. What a gift.
I feel like there's no one else that I would love to share this moment with someone that is creating such impact, but not only within your business, within schools, within your community, but also just within yourself and like your own transformation. 5 years ago, when you started We Assist, take us through why recruiting, why offshore, how did you find a passion for this journey?
Okay, it all kind of came together from a need or necessity for me. It was kind of like I had my own agency at the time, and I was struggling, to run my agency. I only got it to about 479,000 in annual recurring revenue, and I did everything I could to make this agency take off. I still remember working Uber from 4 a.m. To 9 a.m. LAX runs because they were $60 or $80, a run. So I was like, oh, I'm making great money. And then from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., I worked in an office with no AC, no heater for $500 a month. It was like I have an office space, it really was like truly a sweatshop. Like I was like working in Malaysia, but in Los Angeles, it was really, really not good. Humbling. Yeah, very humbling, Yeah, I still remember actually I had a Prius, and everyone else had gotten like a Mustang or a Camaro because that movie, what was it, Transformers, had come out, and I got a Prius that thought gas prices were going to go up, and I was right. My foresight was very good because a couple years later, people were parking the trucks on the side of the road; they couldn't drive them anymore. But I would drive my little Prius on Wednesdays to all my meetings because I could have my button-up shirt on and the AC blasting without sweating through my shirt. But Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, it was a sweatshop. It was just so hot in that little office. It was absurd. Then after 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. or midnight, I had Uber, DoorDash, Postmates every night. Super excited when someone would cancel a meal because I'd be able to eat it, So I'd have like special dinners. You became so creative in having to survive. To the point where I even became, I joined Chamber of Commerce's in every city that I went to because I could do their lunch and learns that were $10, $15, or $20. And I would go to the chefs in the back kitchen and I would ask them, hey, if you have any leftover food, could I pack it up? So they'd give me these meal plates and I'd eat for the next 3 or 4 days.
What was the moment of like, this is We Assist?
This is actually all part of that.
This is you having. This is when you started it.
Me getting to We Assist. Yeah,
this is you getting to We Assist.
I did all this, and Sundays I'd go to the 99-cent store and I'd buy sunscreen for $1 and sell them for $10 a pop at the beach. I was working 7 days a week, but I did it because I was trying to hire a U.S. player. So the cost of a U.S. player was like $5,000 a month, and I wanted to do that plus fuel myself. So I was making $8,000 to $12,000 a month, doing all these like little side things. And I remember working in the car and taking meetings, and the person would show up 9 a.m. and off at 5 or 6. They believe in work-life balance, and oftentimes I get back to the office and I find them playing soccer or watching soccer, or, something on the TV, and I was like, this is rough, So I did everything I could to try to create that capital. And it wasn't until I went to a Hollywood Hills event that someone turned me on to offshoring. And that I saw a gentleman, he was Asian, his name was Vince Wang. Shout out to Vince, you're an amazing human. He had a Lamborghini Huracan and 2 Porsche Cayennes behind him. And I thought, holy cannoli, what's this guy doing? So I hop out of my car, scare the bejesus out of this poor dude. He's 20 years old, Asian, smaller than me, right? Like, I forget his stature, 5'9", maybe 5'7". And I am 6'2", just towering over this guy. And I'm like, what do you do? You know? And he tells me he has an event coming up. And I exchange information. You know, I'm like, what are you doing right at 20 that I'm not doing right at like 26? You know, 27, whatever, what have you. And he has an event coming up a few months later. So I ping him randomly and ask him if he needs a videographer or if he needs help with anything. And he says, crazy you would get a hold of me. My video team just canceled. I was like, oh, random. Yeah, I see. I know you have a marketing agency. Would you, you know? And I go, yeah, for sure. So I hop on and I ask him how many videographers he needs. He says 3. He's like, do you have that? I was like, sure do. And, you know, why not? When do you need it, et cetera. Get all the dates down. You know, immediately go on OfferUp and Craigslist, and I hire 3 videographers, you know, for like $500 for the weekend. The tickets were $8,000. I couldn't afford it, so that's why I'd called him to help him, you know. So I got into this thing for that would have been $8,000 for $500. We'll take it a step further. I got the shirts printed that said my company name and everything on them. And was just like, hey, for the weekend, pretend like you're part of the company. He had no idea that it was me and some other guy in like a shack, you know, essentially. So the guy's still humbled, you know, that he's like, Reef, I want you to stay here at the house. So he invites me to stay at this Hollywood Hills house with 18 of the most prolific e-com names in the industry from all around the world. China, they come from the UK, Australia, and all parts of the US. So I'm there at this house rubbing shoulders with these Ben Malal, Sean Kelly, Sam Venning, you know, Vince Wang, Beast of Ecom, you know, and meeting all these guys for the first time. I'm still friends with them. I've told them this story, and they're like, what? Reef? No way. They had no idea. They thought it was like my company, you know, at the time. So in that house, I met so many wonderful people, and it really was a testament to just like go out and do it and say yes, you know, like keep trying. And Sam Venning had a chat that changed my life. He said, it's no longer about if offshoring works, it's about how to make it work. It's been around for the last 30 to 40 years, you know. And that simple phrase shifted my life. He had a very interesting model. He would take a product like those glasses, you know, and he would put $50,000 of ad spend behind it on Facebook. And if it had a ROAS over 14 days of 1.25 or more, he would get a team of 3 to 5 outsourced professionals and put them in play, what he called VAs. And he'd give them a percentage of the store profits and let them run the store. He had 17 stores doing between $1 million to $3.5 million. The guy was just, he couldn't turn product fast enough, you know? So I realized, here's, you know, light bulb moment. I'm going to do this, you know? And that took me on my journey. And that journey is what led to We Assist. It took me 11 months, 9 tries, and 10 different softwares to figure out how to get it done. The first 3 players were $150 a month. I thought, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to hire an army. You know, all I could think in my head was like, I'm going to have 180 Filipinos overnight, you know? And then I learned that they were, you know, province and using data cards. So they only knew how to say yes or no, ma'am, you know? And that was a quick lesson. The next 3, so 4, 5, and 6, the 6th one locked me out of all my software. So I learned to use LastPass, you know? And held me ransom. Horrendous experience. It's the only time in my life where I felt the need to like fly to somebody like Taken and like show up at their house, you know, and like very Jason Bourne-esque moment where I was like, I'll find you, you know. So I paid him. You know, he knew kind of what I had, you know, profit-wise, so he really extorted me. Cheap, expensive at the time, but cheap lesson over the lifespan, you know. Less than 5 figures, right? Like 4 figures. So it wasn't anything crazy, but it was crazy for me at the time. You know, 1,000, I was like,
it's the worst feeling.
Oh, what an invasion, you know? Just showing up on Monday and
someone could so hold me ransom right now. Like my people have full access to my LastPass.
Oh no.
Yeah, they have all the things. But you know what? Right now, I don't have the energy to like. Right now, it's the least passive resistance that I'm at. But I do agree. It's definitely something. When you said that, I was like, "They could be doing it right now."
Yeah. Right. Right now, especially where you're at, and this would be one of those moments to really lock down the fort. 100% agreed.
I know.
You know, I had no idea. You know, now I've just done this whole digital security thing, which is I have 2FA on everything, which is I'm literally a switchboard for text messages. You know, my team is like,
Yes.
can you send me this code? Can you send me this code?
Microsoft and codes is
Yeah.
killing me right now. So we're actually
Yeah.
moving to front, which I'm really excited about.
Text messages, a little hack that someone is having us play with. Google phone number. Get a Google phone number that everyone shares. Make that the text message drop in for all those softwares. That way, people that can have access to that email can go in and get the code off of that Google phone number.
I've actually done that.
Does it work?
It does work. Yeah.
Okay, good. So
I haven't done it for that reason, but we set up multiple email addresses for just cold outreach.
Yeah.
And Google phone numbers are legit.
That's good. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do and have the team kind of going through those. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I digress. I learned a lot through that journey. And, an entrepreneur kind of knows abuse. Like we kind of grow this weird relationship with pain where we know that pain equals growth. So we become comfortable with the feeling of pain, like the pain chamber, like endurance athlete or, people that do hard sports. So I, knew that success was on the other side. I just had to keep trying. So I didn't give up. So 7, 8, 9, beating my head against concrete. Like, when am I going to get this? Finally, it was the 9th outsourced professional that I hired. That was it. She was gregarious. She was hardworking. She was adventurous. She knew she wanted to tinker. She wanted to be part of a startup. She tried to start her own company and failed. So she really wanted to, do it again. So all this, and figured out this is it. It works. This is doable. And through that process, I thought to myself, like, man, this is a business model. Someone should do this for people, like background checks, checking for payroll, reference checks, who are they, reading through all these resumes, applications, like, where do you find a good person? Who's going to spend 11 months to try to figure it out? Any given person tries once or twice and they give up. They're like, no way. You really have to be a glutton for pain or know that you're going to be successful in order to go through 9 iterations, So it was, that moment where I thought this is a business model. It wasn't until clients started asking me when I would pitch them marketing services, they would say, hey, we don't want marketing, but we're very interested in your people. Like, who is that? And I thought they were trying to poach. I said, no, they're not, stop. After 7 or 11 conversations that were similar, I finally asked, if I could find you someone like this, would you hire them? They said yes. So I went back to all the pitches that said no to me in the last 2-3 months and asked them if I could find them and source them somebody. And that's how I got my first 10 customers essentially. Just by listening. You ask people the right questions and they'll tell you what success looks like for them, and you'll be able to solve that for them. So We Assist was born. Yeah, I ended up dissolving the company that I had, the marketing agency, left Los Angeles, went down to San Diego, worked with Neil Patel. Shout out to Neil Patel. You're a brilliant man. I learned so much from you. You're a great, great human. Ryan Betancourt, another wonderful CEO. Mike Camo. And right back to hard work again. 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Worked in an office in downtown. 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. or midnight. We assist. And weekends, until I made enough revenue after a year and 9 months to step away and do We Assist full time.
For someone who's maybe hasn't explored offshore talent, what would you say to Reef that was kind of navigating that world? Like, as most people know now, there is incredible talent offshore. I don't think that it's really using the right resources and ensuring that you have the right ability to recruit, because it's a minefield out there. So what would you say to someone who hasn't used any offshore talent yet?
Yeah, the question is no longer does offshoring work? It's about how to make it work for your industry. Because if you look at any of the big players in the industry, like Google's 56% offshore, they've done it. They figured it out, and they figured it out at scale. The only thing that's different now in our economy in comparison to then is that we have more digital assets, and they have more digital assets, digital goods, accessibility to computers, internet, so on and so forth. That wasn't available, but prior. So that allows people to now start expanding from not just these large corporations having these tools of outsourced professionals and utilizing their services, but now SMBs, small to medium-sized businesses, coaches, and everything in between, up to the $100 million size company can actually leverage those assets, and those tools and utilize them. So that's probably what I would tell people is, um, you know, it's doable. You just have to find out what and who to hire. And that's true at any level. Buy nice or buy twice. Also, I say, going through doing it yourself is doable, but you're going to pay one way or another. You're either going to pay with time or you're going to pay money. And collapse that time. I always go for the latter because I believe in buy nice or buy twice, and I'd rather collapse time than knock my head against the. At the time being, I had to do it. I had to knock my head for 11 months, but I wouldn't do that again.
I also really think on that point is when you are hiring, if you are using an Upwork, they're all have several clients. Mm-hmm. So the ability to really plug into someone's world is not fully there. And I think what I love what you do, especially in your philosophy of We Assist, is like the more you learn, the more you earn. And I think that's like such a beautiful philosophy that I feel like every company should live by, because like growing is such an important value to me personally. Can you kind of share any other things that you do inside of your company that I just think might help some other enterprises be able to I don't know, think upon their values?
Yeah, some of the things that I'll do is, we practice emotional regulation in meetings, conscious meetings, asking people how they're doing, is very important. Taking ownership and responsibility, what it's like to not deflect, but in every situation, try to find that 1% better that you could have been. These things that, I think we've had a lot of victimhood in our society, and people are very accustomed to blaming external forces or other people rather than taking full-on responsibility of self and how they can manage self and the temple that they are. So we practice that a lot in meetings. As an internal team, we read a book a quarter, so we get together and every week we go through a chapter and we read through a book and we talk about it as a team. If we go back in time, we did things as a species like mentorships, and people had apprenticeships, and even like when you think of rabbis and rabbinical scholars, like by the age 12 or 13, they had to have the entire Torah memorized, and forwards and backwards to be able to recite anything off the top of the head, and I think that's a fascinating thing to look at. And even in the 50s, you worked at a company for a long term and you were guaranteed a certain outcome, and you were there long enough, your income would grow and your whole family would be taken care of, etc. We're entering a time when things have become very numerically ran by a P&L. How do we cut as much labor down to make so on and so forth, X, Y, Z, ABC. I believe that going back to that old adage of pouring into people, and making the best of people and creating the best of people and developing people is incredibly important. Education is one of those things, For me, I have 3 mission statements that I live by. One of them is my company mission, which is to feed as many people around the world as humanly possible through equally advantageous opportunity. My second mission is my personal mission on this earth, and that is to make the world a better place so that future generations can have a better platform to answer some of the questions that we haven't yet answered. Ocean, brain, space, where do we come from? The ethereal questions, more about us as a species, who we are, what we are at our core, etc. Those I think are so important, and teaching people that you don't have to be the answer, but you could be a part of a greater answer, and that's a huge gift to the next generation. If you think about quantum mechanics, Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, and he went to E=1, and everyone thought E=mc². Oh my gosh, this is it, and people got so excited.
Do you know what that is? That's my initials.
Is it really?
EMC.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Molony, Cook. Strong. You are Einstein. Brilliant woman. She loved that.
I'm definitely not Einstein. You know what's funny is my biggest weakness is spelling.
Are you a good reader?
No, I'm horrible at reading, spelling, writing.
Same.
Like, to the point where Jesse has to like, oops, you spelt that wrong in the webinar.
That's okay. We all have strong suits and weak points, you know? Oh my gosh. Do you practice reading?
I read. I don't know if I call it practicing, but I do read. But
practice.
I am wanting to actually write a speech.
Not using ChatGPT?
I feel like an element of it will still be ChatGPT. Can't get rid of it. She's my girl.
And not move it around so much. So going back to Einstein and his theory of relativity, there was a whole group of people that kept quantum mechanics alive, and because quantum mechanics was actually around at that time. Like most people don't know that they were studying quantum mechanics when Einstein was creating the theory of relativity. And it did such a good job that those people did such a good job at keeping it alive for the last 100 years in the shadows. They literally were working in a dungeon when no one else cared about what they were doing or what they were producing because they believed in what they believed in so much. And I think that's a huge gift to tell people that you don't have to be the answer, but you can be part of a greater answer, and that's a huge gift to society and humanity. So that's my second principle, essentially creating a better platform for the next generation, because the previous generation availed us laptops, cell phones, internet technology, electricity, combustion engine, planes, mathematics. We've just been building as a species, over on top of things. So we should give the next layer of species more success, and more tools to be able to create even more success. We're gambling on the future, essentially. And my last principle is how do our inputs today impact the next 2, 5, or 10 generations? And each one of these kind of culminates to what we assist as a whole, and the educational piece, like you shared, and the educational piece was, how can we create generational change? And I believe it's definitely through education. We can educate people to get to a better tomorrow. And I think that's, we've underestimated that as a species. We've almost made education like a playground, or like a almost daycare of sorts for parents so they can go out and work, when really we shouldn't have classrooms of 1 to 30 or 1 to 60. We should have 1 to 1, 1 to 2, 1 to 3. It should be the most important thing we do as a species, is educate our next generation, indoctrinate, help them, develop them, study, what's working, child development, etc. That should be the most important focus as a species, because it's literally seeding the next generation. And we've done the opposite, I think, So I believe in the private sector going back into education and helping in that regard. I think corporations have a duty and a responsibility to the next generation to teach people through their profits, because not only, and it's selfish because you actually create a better employee and a better team member that is more emotionally intelligent. They do better, they work harder, and they stay longer. So it's good for your company, but also what they learn with you, they will trickle onto their youth, to their kids, and it'll grow, Entrepreneurs are phenomenal. You read a lot. Your brain is phenomenal. I get to hear you.
I don't read much.
You don't read much?
No, I'm very much. I do. I watch a lot of YouTube.
Wow.
If I want to learn something, and then I find a mentor in that area, and I'll whatever I can do to get in on just calls. But I really learn by failing and action taking, not by reading.
Holy cannoli. Mm-hmm. You have it. I mean, I can't compliment your brain enough. I probably say this a lot, but your brain is shoots the boots. And I had no idea that it was not read. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I'm dyslexic. I struggle reading.
Me too.
Yeah, I struggle reading.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I'm such a driven entrepreneur, is if I can't figure something out, I'll just keep doing
it. I Audible with a Kindle on. I went from 0.75 reading to 1.5, 1.65 reading because of the Kindle and Audible combo. So now I can listen and read and keep along faster.
You could?
Yeah. I trained myself
genius.
to get there. Thank you. Saw it from Alex from Moise. That's little cough.
It's the weather.
It is. I've had allergies. I've been sneezing and coughing all night too, so I get it. Arizona air. It's a thing. Oh shit, this is so good. So yeah, as a company, I put education in. So I created a 13-month salary bonus, and from that 13-month salary bonus, for every class they attend, they earn more towards that bonus. And I believe that if more companies attached a financial gain to education, we would be able to create a better next generation. Entrepreneurs have a lot of knowledge. They learn the soft skills and teach the soft skills, and that most people don't. They're ongoing learners, So we should hand that down to the next generation and to our own workforce. And that's my essentially thesis, or what I'm testing through my company. I would like to do it over 1 million people monthly. I want to just have the largest learning platform that is a payroll company that teaches, all in one. End goal, I can't wait to have entrepreneurs speaking at every Monday, like almost like a special forum, and people could go and attend their own special classes. And for the classes that they attend, they'll actually get paid to learn, rather than the other way around, where you pay to learn. They would get paid to learn, is what I would like to create, like almost like a backwards tuition of schools is my long-term goal. I want to turn that into paradigm entirely on its head. Yeah, that's my long-term.
I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought you would. Yeah.
I think also just within DFX, actually, every time we have one of those pitch tank events, I'm like, this is education live. And that's the thing that I wish that the communities that I've been in for deal makers before had, was like, let's see the live feedback from capital providers, because it's fine to hear the deal. Like, you can read a pitch, but until you actually know what that expert in that industry thinks, that have been in it for decades, you don't really get to learn properly. So that's what I'm really excited about, just like within our company, is being able to provide that education on becoming a deal maker in a certain sector without feeling like you have to pay, like it's $10 per month.
That's so good. Like, I mean, that would be a fun YouTube. I would watch that. It's almost like Shark Tank, but Shark Tank feels very fluff now. Like they're too much vetting, pre-vetting. Like that would be a very raw, gritty Shark Tank. If you guys recorded that on YouTube, like those pitch competitions and pitch decks and all that were happening live, it'd be pretty neat. I would watch those. I'd pay to watch some of those recordings.
I'll give you the Fathom Note Taker from our commercial real estate one.
Oh my gosh, I would love that. I'll watch that.
It's actually Ari. Shout out to Ari. He got his family office to be panelists.
Yeah.
And he just did the cool, like, it was so like
Shawshank Redemption.
No, it was so Shark Tank like in his own way. Like it was like.
You did tell me he's a super funny Jew. So I
just really appreciated the energy behind the whole webinar that happened. It was quite fun.
I can't wait. Yeah, I would love that. I also listened to your podcast with Jennifer Hill, and that was great too. You guys,
that was a good one.
Oh, so good. Yeah, so good. Jennifer was there through a lot of my my last season. That was very heavy. She heard me at like 3 different seasons and 3 different voices and 3 different headspaces. It was awesome. It was awesome. Yeah.
I'm going to see her next week.
You're lucky ducky. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll give her a big hug.
Yeah, hold her, please. Yeah.
I'll FaceTime you.
That'd be good. Yeah, I would love that. I would love that. To see both of you in the same space, I'd lose it.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. So
don't forget.
I got to figure out the time zone. Reef, I want to do a part 2.
Okay.
We're going to do a part 2.
And I want to do more of you, too. I want to learn more about you, who you are, what you are as a person, yeah.
But I really appreciate you sharing. I think that there's so much value in sharing what goes on in an organization to be able to support growth inside of humans. Because that's really where my lens is really lying right now, is how do I build the culture that is both driven but also down to earth and is always wanting to be a student, because that is I think especially in the world of finance, it's a different beast over there. There's a lot of ego, there's a lot of big words, but for me, it's also new. And so I don't mind hiring someone that hasn't had specific background as long as you have the will to learn.
The gregariousness and go-getterness, yeah.
Yeah.
I think what really helped me was I had a dog that I loved. His name was Apollo, or some major, you know. Shout out to my standard poodle. And, you know, I loved him. He's so good. He's champagne. And, you know, I learned how to, I trained him in English, French, and German. Because those are the three languages. I did a bunch of research, and poodles are the smartest dog that you can, besides...
Is this the one dog you gave away?
Yeah. Oh, I loved him so much.
I can't believe you gave away a dog.
Oh, I can't. You know, that's actually...
That's the one thing that I've heard about you that I'm like, I can't resonate.
You know, I had a ex-girlfriend, that same ex that, you know, I've talked about, that... you know, she didn't get along well with them. She had misophonia, which is like an auditory thing she can't listen to, and the dog would make a sound like, and it would get to her, so she couldn't, you know, listen to it. And we were traveling around the world, and, you know, as we were traveling, I just felt bad having him in kennels. I was paying like $1,800, you know, just for his like stay-at-home like care, and it was like, man, is this really the life for a dog? He's growing up in a, you know, metal box, you know, for months. It was the hardest decision I had to make, you know, and I really did it thinking, you know, I'm going to marry this woman, so if I'm going to marry her, like, I can release this, you know.
Don't have any shame on yourself.
I do, though. I carry a lot. I carry a lot.
Don't have any shame
I carry tons.
No,
I can't tell you how much.
You really have to make sure that it's not about you. You know, like, and I think that's actually such a good lesson. Sometimes I think you know how people say something to share their perspective. Me and Neri were actually talking about this on the phone the other day. I said to him, I was like, you know what's something that I just like really reflected on? You don't always have to share your perspective. Like, even though, yes, that is important to share your perspective.
Yeah.
Sometimes I realize it's like, it's not about you. Like, why do you have to share your perspective? It's the ego. Yeah, very true. No, so true. Yeah, you're right. I do carry a lot of shame from that. It's interesting that you say that. I think if I really was honest with myself, if I really asked myself, I carry a lot of shame from that. Because, you know, I have, you know, that dog to me was a dog that my father left when I was younger, you know, and I told myself that I was like my kid, or me practicing to be a dad, and that I would never leave that dog. And I ended up leaving that dog, you know, for a significant other, thinking like, oh, you know, this is a forever thing, so I need to invest all my energy into this, you know. But I definitely carry like a lot of guilt just from that experience. But I digress. I won't take it to that. I'll get off of that subject. What really helped me was teaching him and learning. In teaching Apollo, right, I learned that you have to not force the animal, but learn the animal's language. I read a book on how animals operate, and here's me on Father's Day. Look, just to give you an idea of how much I love this dog. I dressed as a poodle, and I was like, he was losing his mind. He's like, what are you? You know, like, are you my dad? Like, I just love this dog. And you can go through all these. This is like, this is him as a nugget. And I really, I learned that if you learn the language of the other party, then you can deliver messages and create an outcome that you want. Apollo would walk by my side without a leash on. Other dogs would bark and run around. He would just sit there, you know. But I even do that with humans.
That's what I learned.
Right.
I learned training and people and management through Apollo at the highest level. Like, it was incredible what I learned from Apollo. Like, Apollo taught me more than I taught Apollo. And
of course.
It was fascinating. So English, German, and French. And next thing you know, I thought to myself, I could do this with people. And that's what literally that channel went through. It's like behaviorally training people and teaching people and behaviorally training myself to get a desired outcome. But Apollo is a huge portion of that for culture. How do you develop great culture? Well, humans are just behavioral creatures, and if you can find a way to communicate their language and shift them to the behavior that you're looking for that creates the best outcome for you and them, but you do it in a way where you're on their side and working together as a unit rather than demanding something of them, then you're going to have a person that goes with you for a very long way, for a very long time. A hyper committed love, like a unbreakable bond between people.
What does that look like for you if you were to break that down into tangible things for an organization to reflect on their culture, or how could someone make adjustments to maybe their leadership style?
Empathy, empathy and understanding where people come from, asking questions and understanding who and what they are, making a person feel heard and understood in their experience of where they're at in the company, and then from that translating to them what the gravitas is to their actual position. Do
you use any of those? What are they called? Quizzes. Those.
Oh, like Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
What one?
Disc assessment, Myers-Briggs. We use the YOS, which is a great one. There's one that a friend of ours, Jennifer. I'm excited to try out. Yeah, Omni.
Yeah. I'm really excited to try that out.
It's fascinating data. These things, I think, create... and there's a practitioner I just used, Busy Gold, that has a whole thing that she also has that you actually intake when you go on, that tells you like what your score is in certain areas, and empathy and like gregariousness, etc. If you're very far right, very far left, or right in the middle, I think all those really have a lot of telling signs. And you can go on ChatGPT and just ask, like, what does an ENFJ look like with a ENFP? Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh.
My girl chat.
Yeah, your girl chat, exactly, your best friend. That text you sent earlier was hilarious. I was like,
I think this is going to be the longest podcast on the... So my podcast, Jennifer was the second longest. I think you're going to be the longest.
Jennifer and I had a 2-hour long conversation.
Yeah.
And I find that, I think it was also Mindset Mary, who I connected with Jennifer, and Mindset Mary connected with Nick and Ann Peterson, right?
Right.
Her and I had a 2-hour and 57-minute long podcast. That was just impromptu. We didn't plan it. It was supposed to be 30 minutes, and it just took off,
I love it.
I find that does tend to happen for whatever reason. But we can cut this and then have another one.
Two.
Yeah, so part 2, part 3, part 4. I'm really interested in you and your story, your journey, and I think there'd be no better homage to the first, fearless impact, than knowing the impact leader herself and what she's done, how she's gotten here. Because I think you at 26, your accolades are incredible. I think people need to know you. I think that you need to have a spotlight on you out of all the people. You're great at asking questions of others, and I think someone should sit and ask questions of you. And I'd be honored to be the person to, peel back those onion layers. I think it'd be so good.
I feel like we're going to have to do that in like an actual studio. I feel like we need a video moment.
That would be nice.
I think we need a video moment.
I'm okay with that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah.
Test. Yep.
That juice was actually really like in the throat now.
Oh. Opening the throat chakra.
So I just changed the podcast name.
Oh, to what?
Fearless Impact. It used to be called Deal Disruptors.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to say Deal Disruptors, but I'm like, no, it's Fearless Impact in my mind right now.
I get that, yeah.
You're like, say new words. So we're currently in Phoenix, Arizona, and this is our second episode of the rebrand of Fearless Impact. And I am so grateful to have Jacob on the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
We only met recently, and we actually met because of a really good mutual friend of ours, Kai. And it was funny because I definitely don't meet many guys in Arizona that I'm like, oh, like super cool, could hang out with, like could see us being besties. And I feel like it was like really refreshing to me because you are young, you're ambitious, but you're also really like conscious and spiritual.
Oh, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's can be tricky, I feel like, to find people, but they're out there somewhere.
Yeah, and I think it's really about who you surround yourself with, and then you naturally see their tribe.
Oh, 100%. It's like that whole idea of like whatever you vibrate at, or like that's who you attract
Yeah.
to some extent or another, right? So I noticed that, at least for me, as I've worked on like changing my internal world, like just different people get drawn into life, and that's just a continual process. So like everyone, the world's your mirror. Like however you are internally will be reflected back just through people or events or like that kind of thing, you know?
And when did you feel like you started working on your internal world?
It was definitely it's kind of a mixed answer. So I grew up Mormon up until about 4-ish years ago at this point. So around COVID time is when I like made the mental decision to leave. But before that, I was very, very devout and did work on my internal world a lot, but through the lens of that church. And it did teach me a lot of interesting things, but I would say I really started taking it seriously after I left, because there was a lot of deconstruction that needed to happen to just like really, I guess, find myself. Because things about like with churches like that, you don't really realize like how integral it is into every part of your life until you leave. And then you're like, oh, like this dogma influenced so many different aspects. Like, who really am I? And that deconstruction process can be pretty brutal, but coming out the other end of it, like, you know a lot more about yourself, that's for sure. But there was definitely a point in time where it was really hard, and I was definitely attracting people that were in that like mind. And then as I've continued to work on it more, I've noticed that like the people in my life have been changing and changing towards what I feel like is more authentic to me. So it's not necessarily like a good or a bad thing with these people. It's more just like who is more in tune with who I am, and like who is more in tune with how I actually feel, and like these people are actually going to accept you, kind of thing. So that's like the positive, I think, of doing the internal work.
I so see that. I see that so rapidly the last 12 months of just how my does it all the time, see? I have to be careful. How my friend circle has just been the caliber of the people. I'm just like, wow, this is the people that are really going to challenge me. And I did not feel that in Australia. And I think the first year in America for me was like super just like go with the flow. Like I really wasn't, I was in survival, but I was also like in like, I'm just gonna live in my boyfriend's world because I don't have a world here yet, and I don't really like want to go and like go out on my own and figure that out. So there was a lot of like this year deconstructing, like attaching yourself to a codependent relationship, even if it was unconscious, because I didn't feel safe in the US.
What was that process like for you?
It was really interesting because I started reading a book about codependency, and I was like, wow, like I didn't think I really knew what codependency was until I started realizing of just like, you know, like when just like my most recent ex, like when we would be like, I want to remove when I said like just then, by the way, Ross. He would say to me, I miss you even when we were together. I was like, that's not, like, it was, I think it got to the point where he had his own reasons And a part of that is like losing your mother so young. He had this fear that I was going to like, you know, just like, you know, whatever could happen to me, or, you know, I was going to leave, or like I could feel it inside of him. And then for me, I was like, I felt safe when I was with him. And I think when the relationship wasn't working anymore, it was easier to stay because I was so wrapped in his world. Like all of his friends were my friends, you know, like, and, you know, I obviously loved him so much, but at the same time I was like, if I want to take my life to the next level, I know this relationship has to end, because he was a social butterfly and I knew I needed to put in a season of sacrifice if I really wanted to be like with a unicorn company and being like everything that I'm doing now with DFX. There's a world that I could have done that with him, but there would have been FOMO, resentment, because we lived such different lives. And I think that's what I've appreciated now, is like I appreciate me actually living on my own terms, not because someone else has a commitment that they really want me to show up to. And I think in my new relationship or my new partner, I really want this ability. It's like no is so normalized, no is okay.
No, very much agreed. So something that's always been kind of interesting to me, and you mentioned it earlier in that point, is like this idea of him being scared of losing you, basically. And then that manifests eventually into him losing you.
Yeah.
Funny enough, right? Because it's like if we hide in those like fears for so long, like people can sense that, whether like consciously or subconsciously, and in a way, like it will kind of push them away, or there'll be a reason to be pushed away. Not to say that that was the reason here, because I don't know the full context of everything, but yeah, I know, like different relationships for different seasons of life. Like that point in time, it seemed like it was great, but then you grew, and now you got to find someone that'll grow too.
Yeah. And I think that going back to what you had mentioned about, you know, obviously leaving the Mormon church, do you feel like you obviously did a mission or a couple, I'm not sure.
Oh, just one. Well, so for Mormon missions, for those who aren't familiar, they're 2-year service missions. So you don't get paid. You actually pay to go on them. And I know, right? she's going, huh?
You paid?
Yeah, you pay like upwards of like 10 grand if I remember correctly. So, yeah.
What a great cult.
I know, right? No, literally. They pay you pay them to do door-to-door sales for them.
I love that for them.
I know, right? It's
Beautiful
like,
business model.
that's what I'm saying. There's so much we can learn. But it was always like, it's such a glorified thing in the church, and especially for men, it's very much like well, we're not requiring you to go, but if you don't go, then we're going to shun you. And so it was this feeling of like, I honestly was a huge fan of the doctrine and theology in general. So I was like, oh, this would be fun. You know, it's an opportunity to just like really deepen my relationship with Christ. But then in the same vein, it's like you get out there and you're doing stuff. And for me, I was in Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. And so it was a lot of other Christians that I would end up talking to. And it was this feeling of like, oh, shit, well, there's other beliefs besides mine. And then I have to convince people that my beliefs are better than their beliefs, but we all believe in the same book. And then that was the start of at least that deconstruction process. But wait, what was the original question again? I totally forgot.
I totally forgot too. Oh no, I don't think I asked the question.
Oh, okay.
I'm curious, like, what was that mission like? Because I am very new to the whole Mormon culture. Like, I went to Salt Lake City and I loved my experience there. Like, I had the best time. Some of my, one of my best business friends, he's Mormon. So I have no judgment. Like, we all are a part of some kind of cult, whether we're aware of it or not. But I'm just kind of more of like a curious lens of just really not knowing. Like, what was that experience like? Briefly, and then what was it that made you like fully kind of, I don't know, like not want to be a part of that anymore?
I get that. Good questions. And honestly, for a business partner friend who's probably listening to this, I have got no beef against the church. Like, it's one of those things that I feel like in every faith and in every religion, potentially controversial take, you if you dive deep enough into the theology of the religion or the history of the religion, you eventually run into this like wall of faith where it's like the facts and the logic line up only so far, and then there really does hit a point where it's like I have to have faith in like the theology that I'm being taught because it doesn't line up with the history anymore. And like we can try and make it work, but it does fall on to more on the tradition side than on the like factual side of things. So in brevity, like that's why I ended up leaving. But I think the culture of the church and like the community of the church and the things that they teach generally are pretty solid. Like culture wise, everyone's super friendly, especially if you're active in the church and like participating. It's amazing. But then it's like the leaving the church that can be really tough because it's like, oh, well, all of a sudden now you're shunned in the community because you no longer have the same beliefs. But
That's intense.
yeah,
How was that? Like, what was that conversation or what was that process?
it was like a so I will say like Jehovah's Witnesses definitely have it worse than we do. Like the ex Mormon community and the ex Jehovah's Witness community and actually the ex Muslim community too, all kind of have a little bit of like intertangling and talking. Like when I initially left the church or was planning on leaving the church, I went on to like the ex Mormon subreddit and I was like, oh whoa, like these guys are a little bit more intense than like for my liking. But I also asked them because okay, so here's my like approach towards religion because it's taught as truth and like it's taught through the lens of like no, this is how like it actually is, like this is reality, right? And if that's the case, like I love science also, and I kind of look at religion like chemistry where it's like, well, if this is true, then it should be able to be held up no matter what amount of scrutiny you put it under because it's truth and you can like put it in the fire and it'll come out okay. And then anything that's not true will get burned away. And so when it came to Mormon doctrine, I was like, well, let's take like some of the core fundamental beliefs of like Joseph Smith being a prophet and the Book of Mormon being true and like question them from every angle honestly. Like, is there a level of faith and justification that I'm putting here, or is this like an honest take? And so through that process, I was like, well, or through that mindset, I basically went to ex-Mormon subreddit. There's a bunch of stuff that happened. And I guess quick recap to leading up to this point of going on Reddit. I had gotten back from my mission in like 2018, moved to Utah, was in Utah for a year and a half, and then COVID happens. I moved back to Arizona, and then my family starts going through a divorce, and I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to like really stay on this religion, like something that I genuinely want to believe in, then I really should give it like an honest investigation. Because on my mission, I argued with enough preachers to hear like just about every angle of like anti-Mormon doctrine that you can hear. And on the mission, like
What would you argue about though?
oh, like everything, like
Really?
the nature of God, like is a pretty big one actually.
Was there anyone else that had your similar mindset?
Like yes and no. Like I would say like an apologist in like a broad sense has a very similar mindset of like, well, for me, I was doing a lot of apologetics when I was out there. So apologetics, for those of you who aren't familiar, is just like defending the faith, but from like the lens of you just learn a lot about the faith. And so then like someone's like, well, what about if someone like, you know, deletes themselves? Like where does their soul go? And it's like, well, from the Mormon perspective, I have the answer. The Mormon perspective is they're fine. They go to like this place called the spirit world and goes from there. But if you ask like a Catholic, and I'm not sure if this is in line with current Catholic theology, but at the time, to my understanding, like they go to hell basically because God doesn't like that. And then you have to do some sort of work to pull them out of it, or purgatory or whatever, right? And so every church has a little bit of a different belief. And for an investigator or for someone who's looking to switch religions, questions like that are important. So it's like the nature of God. Most Christians believe that in the Trinity model, which is where they're all the same person. Like God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost are all the same person. just expressed in different ways. And then the Mormons believe that God, Jesus, and the Holy Ghost are three separate individuals. And the funny thing about the Bible is that you can argue both ends of the spectrum and have pretty compelling evidence on both sides. And then it really just depends, like, what do you choose to believe in?
That's so true. And I appreciate your honesty, because I don't feel like many people talk about this. And I think to me, it's like, I don't matter what skin color, what gender, what, nationality, like so on and so forth. But like, to me, whatever you believe in, that's beautiful. Like, you have your own opinions, your own modeling of the world. Like, I don't think there should be any judgment towards what religion or whether you are or you were. Like, to me, I don't think it really matters in the grand scheme of things. It's good that you believe in something.
Agreed. No, very much so.
Yeah.
Like, I'm at this point in time, I'm very much convinced that we all believe in the same thing. Like, God is the same for all of us. It's felt the same too. Like, if you ask any believer, they're like, I feel it in my heart. Like, I feel it in my body when I'm connecting to God. And whether that's a Muslim saying they feel it through their prayers or a Mormon when they go to the temple, it doesn't really matter, because it's that same feeling that we're connecting to.
Yeah.
And so we're just using different language to describe the same phenomena.
So would you say now you're spiritual?
I would say so.
Yeah.
As like a broad sense, because like I would be considered agnostic, but like
Yeah.
the spiritual community probably has some of the better language for understanding this, but in the same vein, like the spiritual community is very broad
Yeah.
with their belief.
Yes.
And religion is very narrow with their belief.
Yes.
But I think if we can find like a medium approach, I think that would be more of like a middle way approach to this. Because like faith, humility, diligence, reverence, like those elements from religion, if you apply them in the world of spirituality, will get you the same result that religion brings.
Yeah.
But now it's more flexible, and you can kind of work with God in a way that makes more sense to you.
I love that.
Thanks.
That's beautiful. And so let's dive into your mushroom and psilocybin adventure. How did this come up for you?
So it was for those of you who've known me in the past, this is probably going to be at this point in time, it might not actually be a pretty big shock, but I'm already picturing all of like the adults in the church that I was friends with when I was a kid. So yeah, I've tried mushrooms a decent amount of times now, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? But funny enough, it's one of those things that's like, well, we all take Adderall, and that's way worse for us than mushrooms are. Just side note, do your research. But when I left the church initially, I left it for two reasons. The first one was because of like a logical reason, but the second and more main one was, as I had prayed, I had felt very specifically that I needed to investigate, and then that I needed to leave, which didn't make any sense to me at the time, and actually was pretty hurtful, because I was like, wow, God, like I put so much trust in you, and now you're leading me away from the only thing that gave me comfort. And like, that's kind of fucked up, right? And so I had left and moved to Scottsdale, and I fell into like a super deep depression, because I realized like I can't really talk to my friends in the church about this, because all they're going to say is like, well, dude, just go back to church and then your problem's solved, right? Which, yeah, I could see that. But like, I was so deep down this logic route that I couldn't sit in church anymore and be like, oh, I believe in what you're saying. Like it wasn't true to me anymore. And I felt like that wasn't a fair thing for them who still had faith. I didn't want to tear down their faith and put them through the same thing that I was going through. And so, point being, all of this led me to be very depressed, very isolated. And for a while, it got me into therapy, which was helpful initially. Like, it's really interesting to see the way that the brain works. And funny enough, I think psychology and spirituality or religion are like two sides of the same coin, like trying to understand the same thing coming from two different angles. So that was interesting to me. But I brushed a point in my own therapy process where I was like, I'm like not getting better. Like, I'm somewhat stabilized, but like not really. And so it just kept getting worse and worse to the point of like just not wanting to leave my house or leave my bed and just stay in bed all day and just veg out. And I was like, well, I could try to find a psychiatrist, but I grew up naturopath, which is like natural medicine. And so I was like, well, let me see if there's like a natural solution to this. And for those of you who don't know too, Mormons are very, very against drugs. And so like
So true. Like when I was there trying to find some marijuana, like
yeah, good luck.
no, we found it though.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. But yeah, it was like, it was very, you could feel the energy. It was like alcohol is bad. Like you could feel it through just going to the restaurants.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like, and even like caffeine and coffee, like we're just sipping coffee as we're talking. So, you know, I'm a full heathen now, but, it's funny because like they can say, oh, coffee is bad for you. Why is coffee bad for you? Well, on the faith spectrum, it's because Joseph Smith said so. On the logic spectrum, it's like maybe caffeine, question mark. But then you have like 50 million soda shops all around
Yeah.
Utah that are doing way more harm to your body than coffee will. And so it's, yeah, the logic there is interesting. But
Your first mushroom journey,
yes.
what was the date?
Okay, date, I can't remember. But
Year?
year, about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So
And how did you feel? Was it a microdose?
no. So, in brevity, to kind of finish up that story, was investigating like alternatives to helping with depression, and I had read in the YouTube comment section that like, and I'd seen this in a couple different places. People were like, "Oh my gosh, like one mushroom experience cured my depression," and I was like, "That sounds like bullshit," but you know what? At this point, I don't care, so I'll just try it. And so I grew some and then tried it, and it changed my life for the better. Oh, actually, that's a lie. I didn't grow any at that point. Someone had given me some, and I was hesitant at first. I did about a gram, and it was the craziest thing in the world to me. It was the same exact feeling that I had felt when I was in the church, like identical, except now it was amplified. And that feeling was this feeling of like God or wholeness or presence or like love for everyone. And I was like, wait a second, like this makes sense why it cures depression, because it's like depression is such a like pit of, I don't see light anymore. Like it just feels like pure darkness. And so having a perspective shift from a mushroom journey where it's like there is still light in the world and there is still this interconnectedness with everything gives you contrast in that darkness. And you're like, wait a second, I actually see differently now. And so for me, like 2 years ago, that being the first experience, I was like, oh my gosh, like I see what they mean now. And I went back to therapy, and whatever I was working on that week, I can't remember, but my average turnaround time from being like, you know, maybe a month-ish to like really work through an issue turned into like 2 weeks. And then as I continued my like medicinal usage of them, my recovery time got faster and faster and faster until it was like 1 week, and then it turned into like a couple days, and then it turned into like a day, and then it was turning into like, I would go to therapy, we'd find something, I would journey on it or meditate on it outside of therapy, and I'd be like done, and basically just give the therapist like a rundown of what I did on my own. And then therapy sessions started turning into that, where it was just like, hey, this is what I did and what I found. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you're on the right path. And then just like, it turned less into like, what do I do? And then more into like, oh, good job.
I love that. That's so interesting. And so what does that journey look like for you? And what is kind of like, is there anything like else that you go in with that journey, like an intention? What does that kind of process look like getting ready for a journey?
I would say it really just kind of depends. Like for people now that would ask me advice on what to do, it would be more along the lines of like, well,
no, I don't want your advice.
Okay.
I want, what do you do? Like, what was your kind of like those experiences where you're going back to your therapist? What would that look like for you going through that journey?
So it would look like, so a good example then would be, at one point I was really angry with God, and I would consider myself like an atheist. And so a really pivotal point for me was switching from atheist back to kind of agnostic. And it was interesting because that process was a process of like, I was taking this intention into a journey of like, I want to, basically know like if you're real or not, and like, how do I connect with you? And it was just its own beautiful experience. Like, this is one that had accumulated over multiple experiences and still kind of accumulates to today. But that first initial asking was like this very beautiful feeling of just like connectedness. And then that started leading me to being like, oh, okay, well, I am interacting with something. There is a God out there, or some sort of, like, God is the best language that we have to describe it, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the most accurate language, though. And so...
For me, I say high power.
Yeah, exactly. High power, universe, source. Like, it feels much more all-encompassing than just, like, a man in the sky.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so my main intentions using it now are almost consistently to try and connect with that more. And what that leads me to is always to some form of internal work, because...
Wait, one question though. I know you obviously do the microdosing capsules. Is this more of a fuller dose?
Both ends.
But would you say that the journey that you're speaking about is just the micro, or is it actually the...
More macro.
Yeah.
So there's, and I guess for some context, there's like 3 levels to dosing and using mushrooms. Like, you can do micro, which is considered between like 0.1 to 0.3, which is like 100 milligrams, 300 milligrams. A full trip would be like 3.5 grams, so like significantly more. And then there's like medium amounts of like 0.5 to 1 gram. And each of them provide different levels of perspective. And so something that I've noticed pretty consistently with me is that my connection to God is entirely determined by how good my internal work is. Like, if I have fear and shame and guilt and those types of things that are clouding my inner judgment, it becomes much harder to feel God. And so the larger doses are helpful because it can show you like, hey, this thing is bothering you. The medium doses are helpful because they're right on that cusp of not quite going on a full experience, but also not quite in reality. And so you can integrate a little bit better. And then the microdoses are great for the day-to-day, where it's like, okay, I know that for me, for example, like maybe anxiety around relationships or things like that. It's like, oh, now I see that this bothers me. And the micros in the day-to-day are very helpful with like reminding me, hey, like, you don't have to worry about that, basically. And you can heal through it. And then like, as you're interacting with new stimuli, it allows you to choose new options of how you want to react to it better, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, that does make sense. And I love that. I think that's really clear on like the experience of each. And I think I'm curious of like the research on like, obviously right now in America, it's illegal. Mm-hmm. What state is it that it's becoming...
Like decriminalized?
Yeah, there's something going on with that.
To my understanding, Colorado and Oregon are both pretty open to it. California's getting on that train too, which, you know, shocker, right? But funny enough, one that I'd heard that I haven't actually looked into yet was Washington, D.C. I know, right? It's like, out of all fucking places.
True. Like, I love America.
I know, right? Well, actually, some potentially good news for us. Robert Kennedy has been a big advocate for psychedelics, and knowing his past of like being a former addict and things like that, like microdosing and macrodosing and just psychedelic usage as a whole, we look back in like the 60s and 70s when it was legal, like the most groundbreaking research on PTSD and things like that, and just amazingly helpful. So I think it's just a matter of time, but right now it is still illegal for some reason.
Actually, on that note, PTSD, there's one of my friends who invested in DFX. He has a business that is specifically for like veteran like kind of like homes, you know, for when they're older. I feel like that would be such a good niche for you.
Testing. There we go. Yeah, no, I think that the veteran community is one that can genuinely deeply benefit from work like this. Like, they're so tossed aside and everything, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, when I was in Missouri for the missionary work, like, there was actually a fair amount of veterans out that way that were just kind of living off of Social Security because they had received injuries or whatnot. But you could see how, like, war PTSD affected every facet of their life. And, like, PTSD as a whole is very much like living in a mental hell. Like, to use scripture analogy, like heaven and hell, I think, are mental states more than like actual places. And they can very much be experienced here on earth, both of them. Because just as much darkness as there is in life, there is as much light, and vice versa. And so with PTSD and with veterans, it's sad because, like, they serve the country and they get propped up enough, but then, like, they don't get taken care of at all when they leave. They just get kind of kicked to the curb, and it's pretty fucked up if you ask me. So I think them especially can really genuinely benefit from all of this stuff. So
I agree. And right now, I know we know there's only certain things that we can kind of go into, but how is kind of like your journey in this world? Like, what is it like now, and how do you kind of want it to be in like the next couple of years?
So this is the exciting part for me because, like, the longer that I'm in this space, the more I'm seeing how much lack of innovation there is, which to me is exciting because I love innovating things. And at least when it comes to, there's two elements here. One that seems kind of being like a heathen, but I promise is worth it. And the other one just interesting in the mushroom end of things. But, like, on the spirituality element, like, religion and spirituality, I think should go hand in hand a lot more than they do right now. Like, if we are really looking for truth and the truth of how to connect with God accurately and consistently, and, like, no matter who you are or what you believe in, you can connect with them, then there's gotta be, like, fundamental principles ingrained in everything that we teach. And the only difference is the language on how we use to describe it. So, like, can we compile all that together into, like, a program to almost like systematize spirituality? And that's like a couple years goal, because I have had some success with it already, where it's like intuition is a pretty good word for what we feel like is that voice of God, almost, because we feel it in our head and in our heart, and it's unique to us, and it's always like no, you specifically need to do this, and then, like, you do it, and then you feel great, and, like, your intuition never leads you astray, or the voice of God or the Holy Spirit never leads you astray. It's the same thing. And so, like, more conversations around that, I think, could help all of us to grow. Because, like, right now we're dealing with AI. Like, the machines are growing and evolving, but us humans haven't really done anything. Like, how do we grow and evolve? Like, we have the tools for it, which is kind of where mushrooms and other psychedelics come into play. Like, when used properly, they can be amazing instruments for human growth and human potential. Like, this gift of consciousness, this gift of having this life, we've just barely started to understand. We're still just very, very at the start of it. And if we believe that we know everything, then it stops us from actually learning more. Like, you can't be a real scientist if you think that everything that you're saying is 100% true and that you're 100% accurate on everything. Because, like, where's the fun in that? You don't have any room for exploration and growth.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if we approach that same level with spirituality, then we lose our ability to grow and evolve. So, over the next couple of years, part of the mission is to explore that and to try and systematize the religious end of things, because I think that'd be really helpful. And then,
When you say systematize, what does that mean?
so there's, like, this concept that I really like and that I've been using to kind of help filter, but, like, the 80-20 rule. And for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like 20% of the work produces 80% of the results in just about any given category. And so with spirituality, I think you can apply the same rule, where 20% of spiritual practices provide 80% of spiritual results, which are peace, connection with God, connection with others, like lasting self-transformation, like all these things that religion provides and offers, and same thing with spirituality. But ask anyone that's left a religion or even left spirituality, and it's like, yeah, most of the stuff that we talk about doesn't really need to be worried about. So like, what is that 20% that actually provides results? And it's like, let's take like a meditation or like a stillness, for example. Like prayer and meditation can be seen as the same thing in my mind, because they both operate on this like sense of stillness. They both operate on this like, I'm being still and I'm trying to connect with God. And through that process, you connect more with God. Don't use? Okay. And so that's part of what it means, I think, to systematize it. And then where mushrooms and microdosing are beneficial is they help make those feelings and those like connections to God stronger. And so when you're going down this route, because another thing that's really common in religion and spirituality is people that are like, it just doesn't come to me naturally, and it's going to take a lot of work for me to like connect to it. But I have seen people that have been in that situation still connect to God. It just takes some time because they're just not familiar with it. No problem for them, right? But using a tool like some sort of psychedelic can be really helpful in like boosting that signal, so to speak. And then you implement proper discipline or proper like regimenting, and then that connection grows stronger. And so it really just is a matter of like, can we create some sort of universal language to explain what we're going through? And then from there, like, systematize its interaction. So through meditation, through things like being humble and being patient, having love for other people, like those are all things that you can very universally bring into your life. And whether you choose to be religious or not doesn't really matter. You can still keep your religion and follow these beliefs, and your connection to God in said religion will grow stronger. Like your religion is just the language that you're using to communicate with God. So if we learn more languages, we can communicate with God in a bunch of different ways and more accurately get to know him or her.
I didn't realize how much of your, I guess, psilocybin and mushroom work, even though you left the Mormon church, still is around spirituality and God. I think that's really interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, I honestly am kind of surprised with like the lack of God and spirituality in like the psilocybin world. There's a
I think that there is. I just don't know if they necessarily refer it to God.
exactly,
Yeah.
which is like this big disconnect between the two, because you get people that leave religion and religion scars them so deeply that they're like, I just can't use any of that anymore. You like throw the baby out
Right.
with the bathwater.
I also think for me, though, I think that God has become a word for me that is very much like related to these very intense, different verticals that I think it's like, it's kind of, for me, I like the word higher power, because I don't even know if I necessarily think it's a man or it's a be, like, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think for me, it's more like Mother Nature and like, just like different elements of the universe. And so I do think that God has this kind of, I don't know, it's like this different association than spirituality. But I think it's really interesting how you didn't let everything that you went through dictate your lens like moving forward. So I think you should be so proud of yourself for that.
Thank you.
This is so unique.
Honestly, I will say for a nice chunk of time, I was definitely part of that group that was like, no, God's not real.
Of course.
And like, I hate him or her or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Like, I'll reference it in both pronouns because in my mind, I don't think it has a gender. Like, I think it's very close to like a universe or a source mentality. But God is such a like charged word, like you said, that like I want to use it in different ways to show people that it can be diverse. Like, we can talk about the same thing. We don't have to be like Democrats versus Republicans when we talk on the topic of God. Like, let's not be so diehard in our beliefs that we lose sight of the truth.
So agree. I think there's so much hecticness in this space, and I think you just like beautifully explained your perspective in such a like I don't know, like it's such a eye-opening conversation, I think, for a lot of different religions out there, no matter what your background is. It's like you can believe in it, you cannot, but at the end of the day, I think that not many people can go through what you went through and not have judgment towards the word.
Agreed. Well, I mean, like, and that's kind of the crazy thing is I 100% did, but it was exposure to psychedelics that allowed me to approach it from this angle. Because it's just like, it's so sad when it's like the beliefs that, like, for example, like Muslims praying all the time and then visiting Mecca. Like, how cool is that? Like, to have such deep devotion to God that you feel compelled to do these types of things through the structure of Islam. Like, that's beautiful. For the Mormons with temples, for Christians with pilgrimages and missions, like all these kinds of things. Like, we do so many amazing things in the name of God, but at the same time, those traditions have their flaws, no matter how you want to look at it, and generally can cause a lot of harm too. And so it's like, can we just strip away the things that do harm, leave what's good? Because I mean, at the end of the day, I think God just wants us to connect with it, and overall just be a part of it. Because we're all like, we can connect to each other through God is kind of how I look at it. We all share, like, nowadays my belief is a little bit more along the lines of we all kind of come from the same thing and we're just like different expressions of the same thing. And so in that way, we are all connected to at some level. And I think all religion, when you dive deep enough into it, teaches the same morals, but they're just flavored differently, I guess, depending on what region of the world you're in. But we live in a connected age, so we should build like a connected way of belief.
And curious, what is your most active social media channel at the moment? Is it Instagram?
It is, but I am trying to do more of this type of stuff on TikTok. And I actually had a conversation with a guy last night who had a pretty big following at one point and then is now rebuilding it too. And so I hope to like spur a lot of these conversations more on TikTok and probably on Instagram too, but TikTok is most likely the channel, and then YouTube as well. So
I love that. Well, I'll link that below, and thank you so much for jumping on the pod.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.